All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to iTeLearn CSTD second and JPACT fourth batch. So we are in the module of QA, quality assurance related sessions. We had an orientation session last week, and we are starting with the actual topics today. That is day one. So how many of you have attended the orientation session, and you have any questions from that at this point of the time before I get started? So QA module, we're going to deal with all the QA related topics like, we're going to understand how software development lifecycle happens quickly with respect to Waterfall and Agile. And then we'll get into the actual deliverables that are expected from the QA, which are, writing test scenarios, writing test cases, and then we'll get into the execution part of it. While executing it, how do you identify the defects? Like if I just quickly go back and open the document that we were trying to prepare. So this is what I kind of covered in the orientation session, what we're going to look at. So we'll see how do we write test scenarios, test cases, and also we'll go into the execution. While execution, you'll obviously identify some discrepancies. Then we'll log bugs. We'll look at the complete defect lifecycle. We'll look at with respect to initially an Excel sheet. That's like all the startups can probably afford in the beginning, but there are some freeware tools like not really freeware, but you have to pay some minimum amount when it comes to Atlassian Jira, and HPALM is definitely an enterprise-wide management tool. So we look at both of them, how we actually going to create the user stories, test cases, etc. And then we'll also touch upon test planning strategy. Like as you get into the next level in your career after 3 to 4 years of experience, you need to be comfortable in writing a test plan and test strategy as well. Then there are various different testing techniques that the industry adopts, organizations use. You may not really be using all of them, but being a QA, you should definitely be having an idea about each of these. So we're going to discuss these things. So that's a quick agenda for the next 10 hours that we're going to discuss on the QA sessions. And then we'll get into automation and Selenium and advanced topics like DevOps and other stuff. All right. So any quick questions before we get into the first topic today? So the agenda for today is we're going to understand what is a software development lifecycle is all about. And I will be quickly walking you through on the uh, waterfall and the agile model, and then we'll understand the user stories. Umang, as I told you, please write an email to sales.elearn@gmail.com, and I will also inform the team to respond you back immediately after the session. Does it help you? Because we have a team working on 24/7. I'm just an instructor here. I'm not really having an idea who is paid, who is not paid, etc. So all payment related, please write an email to sales.elearn. And then we're going to write, we're going to understand what is a user story is all about. And then we'll look at different examples of user stories. All right. So let's look at typically how the classic waterfall model is going to work. So why I'm saying classic? Because this is introduced around 1970s, but still today a lot of companies are still using it. Not everybody is migrated to the latest agile model. So but most of the industries who are actually developing very frequently to the customer or production, they have adapted with the latest model, agile. Okay, so but before that, what was the actual software development model that was used in the industry for a very long time is actually a waterfall model. So people who are already aware of it, do contribute it. If you have any thoughts while I'm explaining, but typically if you go back to the industry around 5 to 6 years back, most of the people, most of the industries, what they were using is waterfall model. So typically in waterfall model, what it used to happen was the very first phase is actually a requirements phase. The very first phase of the life cycle, we call it as requirements phase. And what used to happen in the requirements phase is typically in every project you will find these are the roles. One is a project manager, and then you will have the development team, dev team, and they'll have QA, quality assurance team, testing team, you can call it as. And then you have a support team, or you can call them as operations team. Support or operations team. At high level, this is what we call it as an engineering team. Okay. All these four teams together work for delivering something to the customer, delivering the project to the customer. Before engineering comes into picture, there will be another non-technical role. It's kind of a technical plus project management kind of a role. It's called business analyst. Okay. So before even we start with requirements, what actually business analyst does is, let's say there is a client or a customer who is actually looking for some software solution. Maybe he is looking for an app to be developed, or maybe he is looking for a website to be developed, or maybe he is planning to come up with an e-commerce portal for his sales. Let's assume there is a client or a customer who is looking for some software solution. From the software industry side, the first person who will interact with him is the business analyst. He'll try to understand what is the nature of the business that the customer is doing and what are his day-to-day activities, how his business starts, what kind of customers that he is going to sell, how the quotations and orders will be taken, how the payments will be happening. All that the business analyst will try to understand from a very high level business point of view. Uh, that's one thing. And then also he'll obviously have good questions to ask him to get more clarity. And as he gets clarity, business analyst, what he's going to do is, in the classic model, he's going to come up with a document, something called BRS. We used to call it as a BRS, Business Requirement Specification, or you can call it as BRD, Business Requirement Document. It was a very elaborative document, which is nothing technical, but talks about who is our client, what kind of business he is running, how his day-to-day transactions are going to start. All that is explained in the form of a document, a very detailed document. Because typically the waterfall projects used to go anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, sometimes 1 year, and I worked during 2007 and 8 times. It's almost a 2.5 years project. It was a 2.5 years project that we have released. So such a long projects that used to happen in the waterfall, and today's strategy is entirely different. The max to max in waterfall you can find 3 months is the highest project, but a lot of companies even moved out of that. And today, with respect to Agile, we are actually releasing it like every 4 weeks or max 6 weeks. And there are some companies who are releasing every week. Okay, so we'll get into all that by end of this session today. So what used to happen was this business analyst, after discussing with the client, he used to come up with a business requirement specification document. Based on that, now when it comes to the requirement phase, PM used to understand this BRD PM is a technical person again. A lot of companies call them as technical project manager, technical product manager, technical program manager. So we expect PM to be technical. Okay, so and who can actually move to the PM role? Anybody who has a QA experience, development experience, anybody can, maybe after working in the industry for a good 8 to 10 years of experience, you can actually become a PM if you're really good at handling all the projects and the deliverables, etc. So PM is going to come up with in the requirements phase, PM is going to come up with something called SRS. He used to write a document which is called SRS, Software Requirement Specification. Some companies also used to call it as Functional Specification, FS. Ideally, the best term to call it as SRS, because a project not only contains functional requirements, but it will also contain non-functional requirements. When I say non-functional requirement, things like how the performance of the system should be, how many users can simultaneously work, like basically we are talking about the load of the system. How about the accessibility of the system, who can access the system, whether it is like everybody can access or only properly visioned people can access. So typically an SRS used to cover a very detailed requirements, both functional and non-functional. Non-functional like load, performance, security, all other aspects of it. When I say functionality, how the system should behave, like what a customer can do with the system, how we can actually log into the system, how we can order items, how we can make the payments, how we can check his history of the orders. If I just take e-commerce as an example, because we are all familiar with that. So typically the PM used to write a very detailed software requirement specification consisting of both functional and non-functional requirements, and the document used to be so long as 20-30 pages. Wherever he could provide with a nice snapshots, screenshots, how it can look like. He used to take the help of PPTs, in order to prepare those screenshots, or maybe he used to come up with wireframes. There was a technology called wireframe in which you can actually design the screens if there was a clarity. Okay, so that is how the requirements used to be documented in the waterfall model, and then that used to go into a phase, the next phase of the life cycle. We used to call it as a design phase. The next phase of the life cycle was design phase. And during the requirements phase, like this phase itself could have gone at least like 1 month to 2 months. If I'm taking an example of a 1-year project, if I just take 1-year example of waterfall project, this phase itself used to take 1 to 2 months of time. And if you are just wondering, being a QA, what was my role or what is my responsibility? Because we need to understand that as well very clearly. What are our roles and responsibilities being a QA? Your expectation during the requirements phase was, as and when the requirements were documented. So since it's a very large document and it is going to take him at least 1 month to prepare, he is not going to take the whole 1 month and give it to all the stakeholders. So he used to probably give a deliverable on a weekly basis, or at least as soon as the first draft is ready. Let's say the first draft was ready in the 2 weeks of time. So both developers and QA, okay, he used to share the document to everybody at the same time. That involves dev and QA. Now the responsibility of the QA in this particular phase is, you will try to go through this entire document and you basically understand the requirements and check whether the requirement was complete or not, whether he is actually giving you the complete information or not for every requirement, and also check whether the requirements were correct or not. In the sense, for example, by looking at some of them, you will get a lot of questions, obviously. So by clarifying your requirements, then you may feel it is correct, because while writing, PM understanding may be something different, but actually client what he wanted was something different. PM understanding was, let's say from a client it went to BA, right, business analyst, and from business analyst now it's gone to PM. So there might be certain, you know, I would say incorrectness or ambiguities in that. So you need to ensure the requirement was completely explained and it is correctly explained. And main important thing is it is consistent. For example, in one section, it was talking about the authentication should be a one-step authentication. In another place, it is saying it is a two-step authentication using email ID as well as an OTP on the phone number. So you should get a clarification, like whether we should go ahead with just the email ID and login password, or email ID and the OTP on the mobile. So what is this? Like, requirement should be very consistent. So you being a QA, you will ensure requirements are clearly understandable. There is no ambiguity and they are kind of correct and they are consistent. Same thing the dev also tries to think about whether the requirements are very clearly explained or not. And you are welcome to ask any questions to the PM on this document that is provided to you. You can put the questions in the email, you can call for a meeting and get a clarifications. But first of all, being a QA, you should understand the requirements well, because then only your deliverables are going to be prepared well, like your test scenarios, test cases, and then your execution on the application is going to be perfect. So this is how the requirements phase used to go. Okay. And then we also kind of used to send this document to client back and say, hey, we documented all your expectations. Can you please have a look at it and give a sign off whether the document is fine or not? If the client can review, he will review and say, yes, go ahead, all my requirements are captured. Or he will say, no, one of the main requirement got missed, so you should actually cover that as well. So after we get a sign off from the client, then we used to move to a phase called design phase. During the design phase, what used to happen was, now both dev and test used to be very active. Please try to understand what are the responsibilities of the dev and test. So dev team, they used to come up with something called design documents. They used to come up with something called design documents. So just the today only going to be a conceptual session. Starting from tomorrow itself, we'll start deliverables like, writing test scenarios and test cases. So it'll be definitely more interesting. Okay, so somebody has a question. If you change your pen color in different concept, it's really okay. Let me do that. Sure. As I move to different thing, let me do that. So the next phase that I'm talking about is the design phase of the life cycle. And what can happen in the next phase? So this is your first phase, requirements phase, and the next phase is called design phase. So during the during the design phase, the development used to come up with something called design document. And they used to be in two formats. One is called high level design. The other one is called low level design. What is that? So typically, if you take any application, it will have 3 layers. Okay. So typically any application that you consider, it will have 3 layers. One is called the UI presentation. You consider any application today, maybe a website or maybe an app. So it'll have a GUI, which is a presentation layer. And then you will have a middle layer where the business logic will be written. It is called middle layer. And then every single application, you can expect a database. There will be a database, because whoever is going to register into our system, we're going to store that information in the database layer. And next time when they come and log in, obviously we'll have to ensure whether he's a valid user or not, and then only provide an access back to onto the application. This is where n number of customers will be working from different geographic locations of your uh, world. So first one is going to talk about at high level how my UI is going to be. What am I going to use? They'll also talk about a little bit of technology here, how we are going to develop this UI. Whether are we going to use Microsoft WPF, Windows Foundation, presentation foundation server, or we're going to use Java. How we are going to build this UI. Then they're going to talk about middle layer, how we are going to develop this business logic. Um, in what, whether we're going to build some workflows to take care of all our business flows, or are we going to write everything as a kind of a common function and call it. And similarly, they used to talk about how my database is going to be, what kind of different tables that we're going to build, and how we actually validate when a customer logs in, and when somebody purchases something, how we are going to validate. So all that they're going to think in the form of high level design. And they also used to come up with something called low level design, in that they're going to explain in middle layer how each of these business logic is going to be working. So they will explain very detailed about each and every component internally, how the system is going to work. Same case, what kind of validations we are going to have it on the UI, what kind of database procedures we are going to build, what kind of tables we are going to build. And let's suppose if you're going to make your application available worldwide, how many different servers we're going to put in different locations. For example, I'd order something from US and then I want it to be delivered in India next week. Suppose if I travel back to India, then how we maintain the data in US side, and how do we maintain the data on the Asia Pacific side, what kind of replications that we need to build in these two servers. So all that are going to be very detailed, explained in low level design document. Is it clear at very high level what is the difference between HLD and LLD, or anybody has question? High level design, low level design. Those are going to be explained in a document. Uh, at high level, how many layers we're going to build, and these are all not just 3 different servers. Frankly speaking, based on the number of customers that you're going to have, you will have many of these servers, like in order to load balance, because you're going to get number of customers parallelly or simultaneously logging into the system. So how you're going to load balance them, how you're going to access the database when multiple requests are coming. So all that will be with multiple servers, not just one server. Think of Facebook, think of Netflix, think of Amazon. Do you think they'll just have one business layer and one database layer to serve the n number of crores of people connecting worldwide from different locations? No, they cannot really do that, right? So that's where we dependent on the cloud technologies, data centers for procuring n number of servers to take care of various clients. So that's the high level design and low level design. And what is the job of QA? Very important. Now that you have got a fair understanding of the requirements from the first phase, that you have already gone through, clarified your questions, and kind of things are a bit clear. Now QA is going to come up with something called master test plan. I mean, we used to write something called master test plan or a test plan. Frankly speaking, in today's world of Agile, we encourage teams to not to write a very detailed document, but definitely what we encourage is at least have a good test strategy, how you are going to perform your testing. When the product is available to you for testing, which feature you're going to test first, which feature you're going to test next. What if you find all the critical bugs? What is your strategy to do regression testing? So test strategy is something that even today is important, being an agile and faster delivery. But in the classic waterfall model, we used to write a very elaborative master test plan. And what we used to cover in master test plan was, what is the scope of my project? Like, what are the requirements in scope? What is out of scope for my project? For example, okay, we decided this is going to be an e-commerce kind of an application, whether it should work only on Windows operating system, or it should also work on every other operating system. Should it work only on Internet Explorer browser or should work on all the browsers? Similarly, like, used to think, what is the scope for my application? Okay, if I decided, let's say, Google Chrome, then up to which lowest version I should support? Am I going to support very older version that was available 3 years back, or I'm going to support only the version that's available like 1 year back? So, or similarly, am I going to support Windows 10 and Windows 8, or should I even support Windows 7? So clearly talking about the scope was one of the major thing in master test plan. What is your scope? In scope, out of scope, and then what is your approach? How you're going to perform your testing? Whether you're going to do only functional testing or you're going to do functional and non-functional testing. Then what is your schedule based on the clarity that you have? When are you going to start your testing? When are you going to finish your testing? And then what is your test management tool that you're going to use? What is your defect management tool that you're going to use? And when you find a defect, how you're going to take care of it? So which tool you're going to use for logging the bugs? And what is your definition of critical bug, major bug, minor bug? So I'm going to walk through all of that in the QA sessions that we're going to have. So it is a very detailed document explaining and what is your test approach and what you're going to perform from the testing side. Now that you got the clarity of the requirements, it's the right time to do master test plan. So that is what it used to happen during the design phase of the life cycle in the classic waterfall model. Anybody has any questions so far? I'll just pause it a while to understand if somebody has a questions. And let me tell you, unless and until we get a feel that all the requirements are captured properly, we were not starting with the design phase. And only when all these deliverables are ready, HLD is ready, LLD is ready, master test plan is ready, then only we used to start with the next phase. So the biggest drawback with waterfall model was we were not starting the next phase until we finish the previous phase. If the previous phase was supposed to take 1 month, but it took 1 month, 2 weeks more, then you are actually losing some time there. You cannot really start the second phase. So that was the expectation from the waterfall model. Okay, any questions? I'll take a pause for a few minutes before I talk about the next phase. And you'll find it's a very famous and even today a lot of companies are still using. So that's why I'm spending good amount of time in explaining. Because when you go start join as a QA, I don't know whether the company is still adopting waterfall model, or they might have adopted any of these agile or test driven development or behavior driven development, which we're going to talk all that. Hope you all can hear me right. I mean, there's no issue with the audio video. I'm not hearing any responses from anybody at this point of the time. So just say quick response like you're good, or you have any questions. That'll help me to move forward. Okay, thanks Swati. You're saying at least good. Okay. And I'm trying to, some of you might have aware of this concept, so please bear with me for today because I need to onboard people who are completely new to the QA as well. Otherwise, it's going to bounce back us with a lot of questions when we get into the next topic from tomorrow. So just for today, I need to get them onboarded to understand the software development lifecycle, how it is going to work. Then we all will be able to move forward in a very structured way. All right. So I think looks like not many questions. So let me just move forward. The next phase is typically is what we something call it as coding phase. Okay, coding phase, or you can call it as a development phase. So let me just pick up a different color again, maybe yellow this time. So the next phase is coding or development phase. A lot of people used to confuse in the beginning. Just put your question. Okay, so yes, there's one question Neeta is asking, like, is it true that you cannot go back and correct the issues? That's why I'll talk about the advantages and drawbacks of this model at the end of the topic, but it is kind of a true. That's why unless and until the requirements were very much complete, at least with the knowledge that the whole engineering team has, we were not moving to the next phase. And only when we feel that the design was complete, we were moving to the coding phase. The reason, because it's like a waterfall. We were not encouraged to go back and go change the design, because what could have happened is, based on the design, team would have already started coding. And when I say coding, it's not just from the dev side. I'll talk about what QA used to do. Both QA and deliverables would have require a lot of work if you go back and change your design. And it is not enough if you change the design. You have to go back and change your requirements first. And that was not very much encouraged in waterfall model. So it's kind of your previous phase is kind of freezed or locked. Then only you go to the next phase. And today's world, frankly speaking, that's not going to help to the customers. Customers are like kings in the market. They'll come at any point of the time and say, hey, I told you requirement one to be implemented in one fashion. Now I changed my mind. I want it to be implemented in a different way. He can actually come when you actually started with the design, or when you started with coding, or when you have done with the coding, he can come and say, I'm okay to pay the extra money, but I don't want the requirement to be like that. I want it in a different way. So that was not really encouraged in the waterfall model. So does that answer your question, Neeta? Yes, in a kind of true. That's why this model was called like waterfall. How a water falls from a top to bottom. There is no way water can go back. It was encouraged not to go back and change your design and change your requirements when you are in coding. But today's world, majorly, it's not going to work. That's one of the major drawback, because we have a very rapid changing requirements coming up on a daily basis. So what you think of today may not be really a true valid requirement 6 months down the line. And the project used to run for 8 months, 9 months, 10 months. So what you started off may not be really a valid requirement after 3 months. So that's why people are moved to something called Agile. Okay, so let's try to understand what used to happen during the coding or development. Okay, but why I'm explaining this model, please try to understand a lot of companies twisted this in a way that what actually works for them. So that's why you still need to understand this. So during the coding phase, as the name looks like only dev side, and a lot of people used to confuse, there is nothing much work for a QA. That's not very true. You have a major work here actually. Okay, so let me explain both the dev and test. Development team, what they used to do is for example, you have a major project that needs to be completed. That project used to be divided into various modules. Okay, module 1, module 2, and module N. And these modules are further divided into submodules. For example, when I'm talking about payment module, pay through credit card, pay through net banking, pay through debit card, and pay through wallets like PayPal. So there are different submodules. So what I'm saying, this is a project that we are trying to build, and these are the modules, these are the submodules, and each of these submodule is divided into smaller units, small chunks, units, unit 1, unit 2, and unit N. When I say unit, it is the smallest component in the system, like a single dialog box or a single page or a single screen that you can think of. And that can be probably done by one developer. One developer can actually write the code for it. If you give him 1 day or max 2 days, he can actually finish the coding for that. That is what the smallest level we used to divide the project. So what the developer is expected to do is he will write the code for units. Okay, we will write the code for units. Do you understand now what is unit? Unit is you need to break down your project into smaller chunks, as small as like sorry, let me erase this, as small as like that one person can actually complete the coding for it. I think it's becoming very I'll just quickly put all these statements back into a very nice thing. So we understood just give me 1 minute. So we understood typically how a requirement phase works. Then we understood how a design phase works. And then we're talking about coding phase. And all these videos will be available to you post the sessions within 3 to 4 hours. So you can watch it any number of times like a movie, and you can repeat it. Don't do that repetition very frequently. First time just watch it like a movie and then make some notes out of it. And wherever you have questions, then you can actually repeat it back. But don't like go back and forth. Just watch it like a movie. So this is what I was talking about, coding or development phase. And what typically can happen is each of the developer is given a unit to work, and he is actually go and complete the code for the unit. And let me tell you, he's not just responsible for only writing the code. Developer is responsible for unit testing as well. Okay, he's supposed to do unit testing as well. What is unit test? Whatever the small component that he developed, he should at least do some basic testing on that, whether it is working or not. He cannot just simply write the code and merge into the system and give it to the testing team. No. Though it sounds like a testing, unit testing is the responsibility of the development team. We are not going to do. QA is not going to do this, remember. Okay? And you always have a right when suppose you given a project for testing. You can always reject it back if the unit testing is not completed for it. Because unit testing is the responsibility of the development team. Right? So he is responsible for writing the code as well as performing the unit testing. Then what about QA? When the developers are writing the code, typically this used to take a longest time in the phase. For example, if this was a month and this was, let's say, 2 months in a 1-year project, this could go anywhere 4 months also. And then since it's a 4 months is too long, what we used to do, we used to divide this into smaller chunks like 4 months. And the development team used to complete the coding for, let's say, module 1 in 1 month and give it for the testing team. Then by end of 2nd month, you will have code for module 1 plus module 2. And by end of 3rd month, let's say you'll have module 1 plus module, let's say, n, whatever. And then the 4th month, everything was delivered. So that's how it used to work. So now what QA is going to do in the first 1 month when the developers are actually writing the code, that is when we used to come up with test scenarios. What am I going to do? What are the scenarios that I'm going to validate? What are the test scenarios that I'm going to validate? For example, if I take the same e-commerce application, the scenarios for me is, how will I log in into an application? That's one scenario. How will I search my items in the system? That's another scenario. How will I actually add something to my cart? Or how will I place an order? Placing an order is a scenario. Making the payment is a scenario. Checking my history of orders is another scenario, right? So these are some canceling an order is your scenario. So these are your test scenarios. And then for every scenario, we used to write a very detailed test case. We're going to see from tomorrow itself how do we write these test scenarios and test cases, because that's your primary deliverable as a QA. Now, what is a test case? Like I gave a couple of examples of scenarios. For example, let's take again, if I just talk about the making the payments as my scenario, then you will have very detailed test cases. For example, in the making of payment scenario, I will have payment through credit card. Okay. Then also I will have so many, even making the payment through credit card itself, you can consider as a scenario. In that, you'll have various test cases like what will happen if I enter a valid credit card number? What will happen if I enter an invalid credit card number? What will happen if I enter a incorrect expiry date, correct expiry date, correct CCV number, incorrect CCV number, right? And then any other information that or the OTP that I gets onto my mobile. What if I enter a correct OTP? What if I enter an incorrect OTP? All those are going to be the test cases for the scenario of making the payment through credit card. Similarly, suppose you want to cancel an order. As soon as I place an order, I'm going to cancel it. After placing an order, after a few hours, I'm going to cancel it. After placing an order before it is a shipment, I'm going to cancel. After placing an order just before going to deliver it to my address, I'm going to cancel it, like a couple of days. What will happen if I cancel with the payment already done? What will happen if I cancel if I had a payment which is cash on delivery? How all these things you're going to talk about, like will my payment is going to be reversed if I have already made a payment? Or what about the cancellation? No, it's not cancellation. Actually, it comes under return. After delivery, if you're going to do something, it's like a return. It's not really cancellation. So canceling an order is a scenario, and then you're going to think through various test cases for it. Is the difference clear between a scenario and a case? Because it's very important. Is the difference between test scenario and test cases clear? For example, if I go back to a very classic example, logging into an application is a scenario. And you have two fields, let's say username and password. So you're going to write different test cases like a valid username and a valid password, a valid username and an invalid password, invalid username and a valid password, invalid username and invalid password. First one may be blank, then second one with some value. Second one is blank, first one with some value. Both are blank. What will happen? These are all the different test cases for authenticating into your application, logging into an application. So scenario is login, and these are all the second are the test cases. We're going to write all these detailed test cases either to start with in an Excel first, and then we used to review them as a team, and then we used to export them into test management tool like HP Quality Center, or we are calling it as ALM in today's world, Application Lifecycle Management. Or you might be using Jira. Jira supports both Waterfall and Agile. So in Jira, we could have exported all these test cases. So that is the major phase when the developers are actually writing the code. Those are the deliverables of QA. So anybody has any questions? Is the definition of scenario and test case clear? Okay, a lot of people are saying yes, so but I'm happy to hear back any questions. Okay, yes, you all will get a video not directly video. These will be placed in our iTeLearn website, and based on the membership that you have, you will be having an access. Okay, cool. Let's go to the next phase. So that's how this phase, we're going to do it in like 4 months of it. So let's assume the coding phase is completed. We're going to move to the next phase, and the next phase is what we call it as testing phase. The next phase is typically called testing phase, or some people used to call it as stabilization phase, because you're going to stabilize your product here by identifying the bugs, and as you identify the bugs, the development team is going to fix it. So we call it as either testing phase or stabilization phase. Okay, what used to happen? Typically, this stabilization phase, we're going to actually start as soon as 1 month is completed. Like for example, so you started with coding phase. We don't wait for the 4 months to complete and then start testing. Actually, as soon as the first 1 month is completed, module 1 is ready for the testing, right? Then immediately after 1 month itself, we'll start with the testing phase. Okay, what we are going to test, we are going to test the module 1. So what you're going to do in testing phase, you will actually perform testing. Again, don't assume only testers will have work here by looking at the phase name. That's not true, but majorly yes. So testing phase is going to be having a major work. What they're going to start, they're going to start first with something called integration test. We're going to do something called integration test. Okay, what is integration test? For example, I explained, when I say module is divided into various units, unit 1, unit n. So when I say developer is completed module 1 means all these units are completed. So for example, again, if you take the payment, the units like payment through credit card, payment through net banking, payment through PayPal, payment through cash on delivery, all these things are completed. Now all these units are integrated into one module. Developer has done a unit testing individually for each of this unit, but nobody has done a testing after all these are integrated. That is what you're going to do the first thing. After integrating all these individual units, whether this module is working or not, you're going to test it. Please, logically, this is not correct. Payment module will not come first unless and until you have order module, shipment module, delivery module. Payment is the last one, but I'm just explaining so that you all will understand easily. Okay, logically, this is not the first one. So you're going to perform various testings like integration testing. Then you're going to perform end-to-end testing, system testing. Again, I'll explain all these things in one session. End-to-end testing. You're going to do load testing, performance testing. You're going to do security testing. You're going to do what are the other things that you have planned. So during the design, you came up with a test plan, right? In the test plan, you will explain what you're going to perform. What are the different testings you're going to perform? All those things you're going to perform now, one by one. As you perform, what will happen is obviously you will see some issues. You will see something not really working as expected. Customer was expecting something, but your application is behaving in a different way. We call this as defects, which is deviating from a customer expectation. For example, when we were expecting to make a payment through cash on delivery, customer told it should support for one type of products and should not support another type of products. He clearly explained in the requirements. But my developer developed the system in such a way that it is working for all of them. Any product, I can put it as a cash on delivery. So then it's a defect. It should not work because only for product category X it should work, product category Y it should not work. That was a requirement. But my developer coded in such a way that it is actually working for everything. So is it a defect or not? I'm just asking you that, so it's a defect, right? So what you're going to do that you have observed while actually doing the testing. So then what you're going to do, you're going to log this defect. Again, where do you log it? So yeah, there are various tools in the industry. We are going to use Jira again to look at. I'm going to explain the same thing in through HPALM, Application Lifecycle Management. But otherwise, there were a couple of tools like Bugzilla was one of the famous tool. But now a lot of people have moved to Jira. So there are different tools available in which you can actually log it. Like Sudha is saying test management tool, correct? You're asking what is test management tool, or you're saying where you're going to log is test management tool? Saying correct. We are going to log it in any of these test management tool. And while logging, there are a lot of information you have to provide. We are going to discuss all that in maybe fourth or fifth session. What and all information you are going to provide, because if you don't provide all the required information, your defect may be simply rejected by the developer saying, hey, no, I am not finding all the required information and I'm not accepting your bug. Okay, so he may simply reject it. So what information we need to provide and how you can actually write a good bug. Okay, bug is a problem, but we are saying good bug. So how can you write a good bug so that developers can definitely accept your bug and make a fix? So we're going to look at all that. But for the discussion of understanding the overall life cycle, I'm saying in this phase, you're going to perform various testings. As and when you see some defects, you're going to log them into defect tracking tool, and then you will inform the developers, hey, I found a problem. What they are going to do, they will provide a fix for the problem that you have identified. So their primary job is fix the defects. They're done with the coding, right? So the next thing that you're going to do is, as soon as you identify the bugs, they're going to fix it. Like that, when you enter into second month of coding phase, then you will have module 1 and module 2. So then you will again perform the testing for this. When you enter into third month, again you will have module 1, module 2, module 3, etc. The last fourth month is where all the testings you're going to perform, end-to-end testing and everything. But for now, just understand everything as overall testing phase. By end of testing phase, what should happen is all your test cases should have been executed once. We generally try to do twice, actually, not even once. You should have executed all your test cases. All the defects should have been closed. No more defects are open. At least major defects and critical defects are open. There could be some small minor issues can open. For example, there is a small color related picture or UI related picture, and it's not really making a major impact. Then team can decide, no, we're okay. We can actually continue with that. So whatever the team works out, and you also happy that okay, major problems are fixed, then we'll say testing is completed. But until then, until all your test cases are completed, until all your defects are closed, you're not going to really sign off. Okay, so that's the next phase called testing phase. And after the testing phase is completed, when you have done with all your testing, when you have done with all your execution, the next thing that is going to happen is user acceptance testing. The next thing that used to happen was user acceptance testing. So then we'll inform the users who are actually the clients or customers who gave the requirements in the beginning, right? Our client or customer. We'll inform, hey, now the project is ready. Can you perform some validations and let us know whether it is meeting all your expectations or not? Oh, okay. Is there any issue with the audio now? Looks like there was a hiccup for a... Okay, all right. So who is going to perform user acceptance testing? Somebody from customer side, either the customer itself directly, or customer can recruit some testers, or customer can recruit some PM who will actually perform user acceptance testing. It's not the same team, the testing team. It's from the customer side. You might have 1,000 test cases for the entire project, but customer will perform some 100 test cases, very high level, and say if anything is not working, he will say no. He will also log a defect. If anything that's not working, he will also log a defect saying this is not working, this is not my expected, etc. But if when customer finds a defect, the first thing that we'll do is as a testing team, you will take the responsibility and try to reproduce in your testing environment why that is failing, and then you will inform the developer, and then the developer will make a fix, and again you will test it, and again you will inform the customers it's ready. So that's the kind of life cycle we do it. When the users will sign off saying, yeah, the product is good, everything is working as expected. So typically they used to take 2 to 3 weeks. So like this was 1 month, this is 2 months, this is 4 months. Your testing could have gone for 2 months, and UAT can go for 2 weeks. Then we used to deploy into production. So then the project used to be live. Go live, we call it as. That is how typically the waterfall model was working. And as I iterated some of the points, the biggest problem, the advantage of this model was, unless and until requirements were very clearly documented, we were not starting with the design. Unless and until the design was very clearly approved by all the stakeholders, we were not starting with coding. Unless the coding is completed, unit testing is completed, we were not starting with integration testing and system testing. Unless the testing is completed, like all test cases are executed, all defects were closed, we were not giving it for UAT. Unless the UAT team accepts it, we were not putting into production. So it was very clearly accepted phase from each of these. That is like a waterfall going from a top to bottom. That is how the model was. So there was no ambiguity, not much of a chaos in the requirements or design or coding, etc. Everybody was kind of clear on what to implement. But the biggest problem with this is, your customer has given you requirements, let's say in January, I'm just throwing some dates, and you're going back to production and implementing, let's say in October, which is like just 10 months project, and customer can actually see only sometime in September what you have implemented. And what if something totally go wrong in UAT and we are not meeting his expectations, let's say. So customer waited for 8 months to see the project, and now something is totally disappointing him, was not really a good scenario. That's one problem. Customer can see the system only after a very long time, when the system totally got developed. The second advantage is, what could have been a good requirement in January might have totally changed in September with the kind of rapid government rules that are available in each of the country, or dynamic situations that are available in each of the country, or competition that's available for you, your business. Things might be totally different when you actually move over a period of time. So those are some of the biggest disadvantages of waterfall model. And it's a very lengthy project and very long life cycle model. And that's why people started with something called mini waterfall model. What is mini waterfall model? What does it is like, fine, we have to implement 10 requirements, requirement 1 to requirement 10. In the first model that I have explained, all 10 requirements were started with requirement gathering, then design, then coding, then testing and implementation. Then somebody came up with a mini waterfall model saying, I'll not take all requirement 1 to 10, rather I'll take first requirement 1 and requirement 2, and then I'll complete the whole project for you, all the phases for you. Then I will take requirement 3 and 4. Then I will give you in next 3 months, and then we have remaining ones. So rather than doing it as a single project, they say, taking it as whole 9 months for complete delivery, I'm going to take like three months. I'm going to give you something for you. Tell me what is most important for you. I'll do that first in the first 3 months. And when I say first 3 months, including everything, requirement, design, coding, testing, UAT, and production, for only 1 and 2. Then after that again we'll start with 3 and 4. Then after that again we'll start with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are simple ones. So that's how we came up with this. And that only slightly, again, different companies have adapted into another model called Agile model. So before I move on to Agile, let me just take a pause and ask anybody has any questions with respect to Waterfall model as such. What is build? Difference between build and module? Okay, so build is module. I have explained. Your project is divided into various modules. Like, for example, let me take this paint itself, right? Paint application, what you see. Things like maybe creating new document, open, save as. I'll convert into this into one module. Editing an existing one, like something related to view, I'll take it as one module. Something related to this drawing, I'll take into one module. Coloring, something like that. So you'll divide into various, rather than handling the entire project as single one, you'll actually divide into various smaller chunks. Whereas a build, uh, typically when the yeah, these are very good questions, so definitely I need to answer them. As soon as the development completes, right? When the development completes, they'll give you a build called, let's say, 1.1, first build, and testing team does testing on that and identifies a lot of defects on it. Then what happens, development team will fix some of them and will give you 1.2, second version of it. Then they will give you 1.3. These are build versions. Like this will continue until all the defects are closed. Let us say 1.9 is the one where all the defects got closed. So we call it as a release candidate. And then to the market, we'll release it as 1.0. Because this is the first version we want to release to market, this is called release version. But this 1.9 is called build version. So internally, company maintains 1.9. And to the market they release 1.0. You can actually open your mobile, go to settings and see about the phone. You'll find two things. For example, recently iOS 11 got released. To the market they wanted to release 11, but to come up with this 11 they might have prepared n number of builds, like maybe they might have gone up to 11.99. So this is a build version, but to the market this is what they're going to release. For example, just open Notepad, let's say, go to help about Notepad. You can see here the version 1703 is what Microsoft wanted to release along with the Windows 10, but this is a build number which is a defect free build as per their testing results, and they released this into market. So is this clear now? What is build version, release version, what is a build, what is a module? Cool. Any other questions? I'll do one thing. We'll have Agile probably explanation tomorrow. In fact, I'll ask them to share a video that I have recently done on the Agile along with this video. Just go through it. But I will quickly cover Agile model tomorrow, and then we'll get into the deliverables, like writing test scenarios and test cases. Does that sound good? Yes, tomorrow I'm going to show how the requirements are going to look like in the user story. But if I had to talk about in a waterfall model how the requirement used to be, it's a simple big document explaining how login should work, explaining how payment should work, explaining how ordering should work. It's a like any other document, but as an administrator, when I go to what can happen, when I go as a normal user, what can happen, when I go as a existing customer, what can happen, when I go as a prime customer, what can happen. I'm just explaining different scenarios was part of the requirements document. For example, when you are a premium customer, if you go try to an order which is like more than a bulk of 10, maybe the company wanted to give you a discount. And if you're a regular user, you may not get such discount. Cashbacks, all those offers were very detailed explained in the document. That's all. Tomorrow, when I talk about Agile, I'll definitely talk about user story. I'll give you a couple of examples on user story. And from there, we'll start writing the test cases. Does that sound good? All right. So I don't want you to be bored with a lot of concepts on the day one itself. So go ahead with this. We'll meet tomorrow and then we'll talk about Agile and then also start with test deliverables, which is more like a practical way of doing it. I'll take some application and then we'll write the test scenarios and test cases. All right, team. So that's all I have for today. Have a good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you're from. See you tomorrow.